He handed me a glass of wine, smiling, but I'd seen him pour from a different bottle just for me. And this was only the beginning. The table was set too perfectly. Cloth napkins, matching silverware, those decorative candles that had no scent. My son hated formality. So did his wife. And yet, here we were, on Father's Day of all days, pretending to be a family. "To Dad," he said, raising his glass. The others echoed the toast with forced cheer. I raised mine but didn't drink. I started thinking, when did it all begin to feel wrong? He hadn't called in months. Our texts were cold, spaced out. Then suddenly, this dinner invite. "We thought it'd be nice," he'd said, but I could hear the script in his voice. Practiced lines, like he was selling something. I watched them, the way they moved around each other. Her laugh was too bright, his stories too rehearsed. The wine was just one thing. There'd been more. A comment about my sweater being brave for someone your age. A slideshow of vacation photos where they kept accidentally skipping any picture I might have paid for. They were playing some kind of subtle game, and I was the target. His wife, Madison, handed me a small gift bag. "Just a little something," she chirped. Inside was a mug. "Best grandpa ever." I wasn't a grandpa yet. My granddaughter wasn't born calling me that. She didn't even say grandpa. She called me John, like they'd trained her to forget. I set the mug down without a word. The room got quieter. "You don't like it?" Madison asked, smiling tight. "It's fine," I said. "I just wasn't expecting sentiment." The silence grew teeth. Later, as I stood by the window pretending to admire the garden, I overheard them in the kitchen. "He didn't even say thank you," she hissed. "He's always like that. Acts like he's better than us because he paid off our student loans," my son replied. "That was 10 years ago, and he still lords it over us." I didn't move. My hands were behind my back, clenched so tight my nails cut my palm. I'd never asked for thanks. I'd just done what I thought a father should. Quietly, consistently, always there when they called. Now they mocked it, rewrote it, turned my help into shame. The evening ended with brittle hugs and plastic smiles. My son clapped me on the back like we were old college buddies. Madison waved from the door. Only my granddaughter looked back as I walked to my car. "Why were they so mean to you?" she asked softly. I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet. But I would, and it would change everything. I kept turning her question over in my mind the whole drive home. Why were they so mean to you? That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, just the hum of the fridge and the reflection of the city lights bouncing off my window. My phone buzzed, a message from my son. "Thanks again for coming. Hope you liked the dinner." No emoji, no sincerity. I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then deleted the message. The next morning, I started putting things together. It wasn't just the wine. They'd poured themselves something entirely different. When Madison brought the glasses in, she set mine down separately, already poured. My son reached for it quickly, as if to help, then caught himself. I took it anyway, but didn't drink. Something about the smell, it was faintly sour, not spoiled, just altered. They hadn't expected me to notice. I spent the afternoon walking, around the lake, through the streets I'd known for decades. The world looked unchanged. But I wasn't. Not anymore. They had orchestrated something, not to hurt me directly, but to chip away at me, publicly, subtly, like I was the unwelcome guest in my own story, a relic they had to tolerate. I walked past a playground where I used to take him. My son, back when he was small and still ran toward me with open arms. I remembered his laugh, how he clung to my hand crossing the street, how he once cried because he thought I'd forgotten his birthday, when I was actually building a treehouse as a surprise. Where had that little boy gone? Somewhere between tuition checks, down payments, and emergency bailouts, he'd stopped seeing me as a father. I'd become a resource, a wallet, a fallback plan. At home, I opened the folder, the one my lawyer had insisted I keep updated, just in case. Bank accounts, transfer schedules, monthly support. For years, I'd covered more than I needed to: mortgage gaps, business ventures, even their grocery bills routed quietly through a shared card. No one had asked, but no one had objected either. I hovered over the pause transfers button and didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, I poured myself a drink from my own bottle, sat down, and waited. Because if they wanted to play games, I'd play too, but by my rules. The next few days, I did nothing. No calls, no messages, just silence. And in that silence, I watched. They didn't notice at first. Why would they? The money still moved, the balances held, but habits reveal truths and patterns tell stories. I checked the shared expense log. Madison had ordered 2 new dresses the day after the dinner. My son scheduled a golf retreat through the corporate account I'd quietly funded for years. They were celebrating. It wasn't a Father's Day dinner. It was a send-off, a burial, dressed up in linen napkins. So I tested a theory. I turned off one minor auto payment, a landscaping bill tied to their front yard, one I'd set up after their HOA complaints last year. The notification would go to Madison's phone. An hour later, she called me. "Hey, John," she said, too chipper. "So weird, but our gardener says the payment didn't go through this month?" "I figured you'd taken it over," I replied evenly. "Oh, well, yeah, eventually. We just didn't expect it so soon." Silence. "Everything okay?" I could hear it now, the tilt in her voice, a careful mix of confusion and fear. "All good," I said, "just reassessing." That word hung in the air like smoke. Later that week, I met with my lawyer. We sat in the same room where I'd once signed over emergency financial power to my son, just in case anything happened. I remembered how proud he looked that day, like I'd passed him a crown. "I want to revise the structure," I said. "Everything. Stop the transfers, revoke the permissions, immediate effect." My lawyer blinked. "All of them?" "Yes." He hesitated, then slid the forms across the table. I signed without flinching. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. They'd written me out of their emotional life years ago. All I was doing now was catching up. When I left the office, the sky cracked open with a summer storm. I stood under the awning, soaked in the sound of it. I wasn't sad. Not yet, but I knew what would come next. And I was ready. The message came 3 days later. No greeting, just, "Did you cancel the payments?" I didn't reply. He called an hour after that. I let it ring. Then again. Then Madison texted, "We're confused. Can we talk?" They weren't confused. They were cornered. I waited until dusk, then drove to the overlook above the city. The same place I used to bring him when life felt too heavy, during his college rejections, after his first breakup. We'd sit there sharing silence, letting the city lights blur the noise. I wondered if he remembered any of that now, or if the money had erased everything else. When I got home, I found them waiting on my porch. Madison looked windblown but polished, like she'd tried to dress casual and overshot the mark. My son had his hands in his pockets, the way he used to when he was guilty but wouldn't admit it. "Can we come in?" he asked. I held the door for them, not warmly, just open. We sat in the living room, me in the chair by the window, them on the couch. Madison started talking first. "We're just trying to understand what happened," she said. "Was it something we did?" That was the performance. The innocence. The tilt of the head. The practiced hurt. I looked at my son. He said nothing. "I think," I said slowly, "you already know what happened." Madison's smile faltered. "If this is about the dinner, it is." My son finally spoke. "Dad, it wasn't meant to hurt you." Wasn't it? I asked. Because I felt humiliated. Madison leaned forward. It was a joke. We didn't mean for it to. You tried to drug my drink. The air thickened. My son's eyes widened. What? He said. I saw the bottle. You switched it out. Madison turned to him. You said it was just a sleep thing. He stood up. It wasn't anything serious. I thought you'd relax more. You thought I'd pass out, I said. And then what? Pictures? Videos? A story to spin about the eccentric old man? They both went quiet. Do you think I don't know what's going on with your finances? I continued. The loans you're defaulting on? The shell company under Madison's maiden name? You were setting up a clean exit. No, Madison started. I've seen the accounts. My son sat back down, heavily. For the first time, his voice cracked. We didn't mean for it to be like this. But it is. Silence stretched. Then from the hallway, a small voice. Is everything okay? My granddaughter, standing barefoot, holding her stuffed rabbit, blinking at the scene. Madison rushed to her. Sweetie, go back to bed. No, I said, my voice sharp. She stays. They froze. She looked at me, confused. Come here, I said gently. She walked over. I picked her up, held her on my lap like I used to with my own son. This is what real love looks like, I said softly, mostly to them. No games, no conditions. My granddaughter leaned into me, her tiny arms wrapping around my neck. Madison's eyes were wet now, not from guilt, from fear. We can fix this, my son said. Let's talk, just us. But I shook my head. We already did. I kissed my granddaughter's head, then looked at them both. You're going to leave now. Dad, you'll leave. And you won't come back until you remember how to be human. They didn't move, so I stood up. That did it. They walked out into the night, stunned, broken, but not yet changed. Only one person looked back at me, and it wasn't them. She watched from the back seat as they drove away. Her small hand pressed against the window, a gesture too quiet, too knowing for her age. I stood in the doorway long after the headlights disappeared. The house felt different now. Not empty, clean, like something had been scrubbed out of the walls. For the first time in years, I slept without grinding my teeth. The next morning, I went through every folder, every account, every legal tie that bound me to them. I canceled the health plan I'd extended beyond their 30th birthdays, revoked the emergency access they never thanked me for, called my accountant to freeze the trust fund, not out of spite, but necessity. They can reapply, I said, if they want to make their case in writing. The accountant was silent a moment. Then, understood. I stepped outside with my coffee and sat on the porch. The street was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I thought about every moment I'd said yes when I should have asked why. Why did they need another loan when their cars were newer than mine? Why did I babysit their finances while they vacationed? Why did I sit at that dinner, swallowing their poison, still hoping for warmth? Because I loved them. But love isn't blindness. Love without respect curdles into duty, and duty without acknowledgement becomes self-erasure. My phone buzzed. A new message. Not from them. It was my granddaughter. She'd figured out how to voice text me. Hi, John. I don't think you're bad. I think you're quiet. I like quiet. I smiled. It broke something open in my chest. That afternoon, I went to the bookstore and bought her the same collection of fairy tales I used to read to my son. I tucked a note inside. Real stories are about truth, even when they hurt. Love, Grandpa. I mailed it. Not to their house. To her school. I knew the secretary there. She owed me a favor. The following week passed in silence. No calls, no apologies, just space, beautiful, aching space. Then came the letter. A single envelope, no return address, but I knew the handwriting. My son. The letter was long, meandering. It tried to explain, to soften. There were phrases like, "We didn't know how to ask," and "You always seemed so self-sufficient." He wanted another meeting. A reset. I didn't reply. 2 days later, I got another text from my granddaughter, a picture of her holding the fairy tale book, grinning. She'd drawn a heart over my note. That evening, I lit a fire in the backyard pit. Not out of drama, just ritual. I fed the letter to the flames, watched it blacken and curl, let the smoke rise. It wasn't hatred I felt. It was relief. I had confused endurance for virtue, sacrifice for connection. But what I'd really done was disappear inside their needs. No more. The next morning, I opened a fresh journal. On the first page, I wrote, "Today I stopped being afraid of disappointing people who never saw me clearly." And then I went for a walk. The world looked the same, but I didn't. I started saying no. It began small. The insurance broker called, asking if I still wanted to cover dependents. I said not anymore. Then came the real test. The community gala, an annual event I'd funded quietly for years, sent me an invitation with my name missing from the donor list. Just family of, followed by my son's name. They'd repackaged my generosity under his title. I called the organizer. "This must be a mistake," I said. A pause. I was told to consolidate the sponsor names this year. Your son mentioned you preferred anonymity." Did he now? I ended the call. 2 hours later, I sent a formal statement. All future donations were to be halted, indefinitely. A courtesy note went out to every local committee. Not bitter, just clear. And with each severed thread, I felt lighter. Then came the email from Madison. A polished PDF branded letterhead. A proposal for a new startup venture, family-run, with a pitch about generational legacy and a soft request for seed funding. No subject line. No personal message. Just numbers and buzzwords. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to my lawyer with a note. File for record. No response required. He wrote back, "Proud of you." I wasn't proud, not yet. But I was awake. One night, a week later, I found myself sorting through old boxes in the attic. I wasn't looking for anything, just following a pull. I came across a photo. My son, age 6, missing teeth, arms outstretched in a Halloween costume I'd sewn by hand, a crooked astronaut. In the background, you could see me, crouched low, holding the back of his helmet steady so it wouldn't fall. That photo broke me, because I remembered exactly what I was thinking when it was taken. Let him shine. Just let him shine. I never wanted credit, only connection. But somewhere along the way, he mistook support for shadow. He needed to stand alone, so he began by pushing me underground. And I had let him. Until now. The next day, I walked past a park where my granddaughter's school sometimes held recess. I stayed across the street, behind the benches. I didn't want to intrude, just to see her in sunlight, moving, laughing, whole. She was drawing with chalk on the sidewalk, circles, stars, a crooked heart. Her teacher watched from a bench, flipping through a book. I stayed for 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then I turned to leave. A small voice cut through the air. "John!" She ran to the fence, waving, breathless. "You saw my heart?" "I did," I said, keeping my distance. She grinned. "It's for you." I didn't answer, couldn't. Just nodded, turned, and walked away. The air tasted like spring, something beginning. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel owned. I felt mine. I started noticing things I hadn't seen in years. The way morning light moved across the dining table, the quiet click of the heater turning on, the sound of my own breath as I made coffee, not for anyone else, just for me. There was no silence, not really, just space. And in that space, I began to live. I joined a local writing group. Nothing dramatic, just old souls sitting in a library basement, scribbling stories none of us planned to publish. But when I read mine aloud, about a man who gave too much and vanished into people's needs, one woman looked up and said, "That felt like truth." I nodded, didn't need to explain. The next week my son came by. No call, no warning, just stood outside my door with a strained smile and 2 coffees in hand. I figured maybe we could talk. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me. "We are talking," I said. He offered one of the coffees. I didn't take it. "I messed up," he said, eyes down. I think I knew it the night of that dinner, but I didn't know how deep. I waited. "We needed help," he continued, "but we also needed to blame someone for everything we couldn't do, and you were always just there, quiet, reliable. So we turned you into the wall we threw things at." He looked up. "I don't know how to fix it." I exhaled. "You can't." His face tightened. "So that's it? Number. But it won't be what it was." He looked past me, at the house, at the porch we once rebuilt together, plank by plank. "What would it take?" "Truth," I said, "and time, without expectations." He nodded slowly. "I can try." "Trying," I said, "means starting with nothing. No money, no conditions, just presence." He swallowed that, didn't argue, which told me everything. Then he asked, "Can I tell her I'm trying?" I knew who he meant. I looked down the street. The chalk drawings were gone. Rain had washed them away. "You can tell her you love her," I said, "but you show her you're trying." He nodded again, walked back to his car. No theatrics, no fake promises, just silence. And somehow, that was enough. Weeks passed. No calls, no letters, just a slow reshaping of my world, like sediment settling at the bottom of a river. I spent afternoons in the garden, trimmed hedges I once paid others to touch, cooked simple meals, often too much, still adjusting to solitude. But the silence no longer clawed at me. It rested, sat beside me like an old friend. One morning, I found an envelope wedged under the front mat, crayon handwriting, my name, misspelled. Inside, a drawing. Stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands. The word trust in capital letters. No return address, no note, just that. I framed it, not as a symbol of reconciliation, but as proof that children, left uncoached, know truth when they see it. That Sunday, I took the long way to the park, brought breadcrumbs for the birds, sat on a bench as families passed by, some loud, some tired, some stitched together by chaos and compromise. One child tripped and burst into tears. His father scooped him up instantly, whispering something only they could hear. The boy stopped crying, held on tight. That used to be me, and maybe someday it will be me again, in another form, another rhythm. No longer the fixer, the financier, the name on the check. Just a presence, a quiet one, solid, unshakable, like a stone in the river. I closed my eyes and listened to the water.